good afternoon everyone, and welcome to this third workshop from the online tools for accessing and analysing census data from the UK Data Service. My name's Patty Doran, but this workshop was actually largely put together by Rehab Diab, who's my colleague from the UK Data Service, who was going to present today but unfortunately couldn't be here. So we're both based at Manchester and are members of the census support team for the UK Data Service. And this is the last workshop in a series of 3 workshops aimed at showing census users the key online tools for accessing and analysing census data from the UK Data Service. And today we're going to show you how to access and analyse census microdata using the online exploration tool Nesstar. So just as an overview of today's session, this is what we're going to be covering. First, we're going to introduce the census just briefly, and then talk more specifically about census microdata. Then we're going to look at the issues and how you access and analyse census microdata generally and using Nesstar. Then I'm going to give a demonstration of how we access Nesstar from the UK Data Service website, and we will also show you in the demo how to find and explore census microdata live in Nesstar. And then there is an activity for you to do, and this activity will take around 10 or 15 minutes. And at the end of that, we'll come back together and discuss what you found, and also have time for any other questions and discussion. So just first, to give the introduction to census and to census microdata, our aim of this session, the objectives, is to give you an overview of census microdata. We will also show you how to access them from the UK Data Service. And from this demo, you will learn how to explore census microdata and perform simple analysis online using our free online exploration tool, which is called Nesstar. And the demo will also help you know how to download census microdata to your own computers. So first, what is census data? So the first census was conducted in 1800. And at the beginning, it was only a process for counting the population. But with time, it was realised that we need more than just counting people. It's good to know a bit more about them. So more information about the population has been gradually included into the census, such as demographic characteristics, socioeconomic and health-related data. And in the UK, we have 3 separate census agencies. So in England and Wales, the census is carried out by the Office for National Statistics, so the ONS. In Scotland, it's carried out by the National Records for Scotland, also known as the NRS. And in Northern Ireland, the census is undertaken by the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency, known as Nesstar. So the UK census has been collected in coordination between these 3 agencies. And there are some differences between the different censuses. Obviously, because of the social differences between the 3 countries, but great effort has been put in to make sure that these censuses are harmonised as much as possible, as it's very useful to produce data at the UK level. So what is the census? As I mentioned earlier, the main purpose of census is to count population. So it measures how many people are living in the country and where they live. Another important purpose of the census is to obtain characteristics of the population, because, for example, if you're providing services such as building new hospitals or schools, it's important to know where these services are needed. And because the data is collected from everybody, census outputs are able to be produced in to a very small geography, which is very useful if we want to identify where you need to provide more services. In terms of what it's for, well, the census informs public decisions and public spending. So things like local government grants from central government depends on findings from the census. It's also used as a basis for a lot of other statistical products. For example, if you're designing your own survey, you'll use information from the census to design your survey sample and to see if your sample size is correct. So it's good for giving context to other research. As I mentioned earlier, the census is used by central and local governments, but it's also used by NGOs, non-government organisations, and for all sorts of research purposes. All these mean that it contributes vastly to public policy, and it's a very important asset that we have. So just, I've got another quick poll for you to engage in now. So we want to ask you which topics you think are in the census. So out of the ones that are coming up on the poll now, which topics do you think are in the census? And you can select all that apply. So you can household conditions, so what the house is like, how many people are in the household, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender identity. So which of those items or which of those topics do you think occur? And this is, sorry, I should have said first, this is for the 2011 census data, so the data that we already have, and previous, what questions are covered by the census data that we already hold. So I think we've got quite a lot of you voting on that. So we'll have a look at these results. So you can see we've got household conditions, lots of people, that's correct, ethnicity, that's correct, and sexual orientation and gender identity are actually new questions that are going to be asked in the 2021 census. So they haven't been asked up till now. However, there was information about same-sex marriages in the marital status question in 2011, but people weren't explicitly asked about their sexual orientation. So those are new questions, and it's quite a good thing that we're moving on and able to collect that data from our population. So it'll be interesting to see that when it comes out from the data from next year's census. So we'll move on now and show you, this is what questions were asked. So this is a list of the most important topics that were in the 2011 census. So I'm not going to go through everyone in detail, but you can see, for example, that household conditions, there's things like accommodation, number of bedrooms, type of tenure. There is also information about the number of cars available for household members and things like that. And in the 2011 census, there's information about immigration, travel to work, and there's also lots of information that is suitable for research purposes or for any sort of report writing. Lots of census data gets used by local governments, for example. And on this slide, we're just highlighting the different ways that you can obtain census data. So it's an outline of the census data that we support at the UK Data Service. So we provide access to census microdata, and that's what we're talking about today. These are samples of census records. So these type of data are very flexible. They have a lot of socioeconomic details, but the data are anonymized to protect the confidentiality of the census respondents. And so the census microdata is a sample of the entire census. We also have the counts for specific areas, and these data are called aggregate data. And we also support census flow data, and these data count migrants from one place to another, from home to place of work, for example. And we also provide access to the data that allow you to produce maps, and these are called boundary data. And these are basically the shape files that allow us to look at the boundary so that we can create maps. But in the UK Data Service, we don't have the longitudinal microdata. So if you're interested in these sorts of data, you can access them through calls, and they support the UK census-based longitudinal studies. And this is what the census microdata looks like. So this is a sample of how it looks like in SPSS. And the data is from the 2011 census microdata for England and Wales teaching file. So individual records are in every row, and every column represents a different characteristic or variable for that individual. And you can notice that they include age groups instead of the specific age of the respondent. Also, country of birth has only 2 categories. It's either the UK or non-UK. Ethnicity has only 5 or 6 categories, I think. And the same goes for the health variable. So the amount of information is reduced, but it still provides a lot of information right down at the individual person level. And at the moment, we've got census microdata from 1961 right through to 2011. But we're going to focus today mainly on looking at the 2011 census, which are available at 3 levels of access. So we've got the teaching file, which is completely open, so you don't need to register or anything to obtain that data. That's the one that I've just shown you. And these types of data are available without registration and available through Nesstar. And I'm going to talk more about Nesstar later. But just for now, as I mentioned earlier, the teaching file hasn't got as many variables in it for confidentiality reasons, and it's only based on 1%, a 1% sample of individuals. If we move to the next level, safeguarded data, these data are downloaded after signing up for an end user license with the UK data service. So by safeguarded, we mean you just log in with a username and password, and once you register with the UK data service for the first time, you'll be agreeing to that end user license for the data. So if you study or work at a university, you'll be able to log in through your university sort of registration system. And if not, you can contact the UK data service and we can provide you with the login details and provide you with access. You get more detail in the safeguarded files, and it has larger sample sizes. We've got the regional samples for all of the UK countries, England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And we've also got local authority files, and both files are based on a 5% sample of individuals. Then there's also the secure file for England and Wales, which is available through the Secure Lab. But to get these sorts of data, you have to be an approved researcher, and you must apply for the data, and you can only access them in the Secure Lab. There are individual and household controlled files, and there's more detail in these files, and each is based on a 10% sample. And if you are considering applying for any secure access data, just be aware that it's a process that can take some time, and you will need to have Secure Lab training as well before you're able to access that data. And just for reference, we do have guides of the topics available in each census microdata file from 1991 to 2011, and you can download these from the UK Data Service website in an Excel spreadsheet, and it shows you all the topics available for each microdata file. So I'm going to show you the catalogue records in a bit, but it's just important to realise that there's quite a lot of documentation attached to each data set. So you might ask, what are the main characteristics of census microdata? Why should you use it? So we would say that census microdata is very flexible. It has a large sample size, so you can create your own tables with these types of data, or you can combine different variables and characteristics to make new data from it. So census microdata allow you to define subsamples. You can also run types of statistical analysis like regression analysis, multivariate analysis, or multi-level modelling, for example. And because the data were collected in different years, you can also study changes over time using these types of data. But because it's sample data, we have to remember that the results will be estimates. Also, these data don't have a geographical data detail because they've got socioeconomic detail. Again, this is for confidentiality reasons. And this is just some examples though. Lots of research does get published using census microdata. So here is just a selection of publications on different topics, such as housing disadvantage with the census microdata. So now I'm just going to take you through different ways of finding the data. First of all, by the type of access. So where to find the microdata. So the open data are available in spreadsheet format, so that's in CSV files from the 3 census agencies. And they're also available from the UK Data Service without registration as SPSS and Stata formats. You can also access them via Nesstar. The safeguarded files are available from the UK Data Service, but as we explained earlier, they require online registration in order to actually download the data. These sorts of data were collected for the censuses from 1961 to 2011, and the secure data are available only via the 3 census offices. So you can find full information on the Census Microdata webpage, which I'll show you in a bit, and it's part of the UK Data Service Census Support. And also the different census offices have their own information about the census as well. So accessing census microdata from the UK Data Service, as I mentioned, that we have a dedicated census support pages, and you can access all the different data sets from there. Or you can find the data by searching our catalogue, which is found on the main page of the website. So when you first log onto our website, you'll be able to see the data there. And then you can access it online and explore it in a bit more detail using Nesstar. So to access data on Nesstar, we have the teaching files, which, as we mentioned, don't require any registration. But we also have the safeguarded files, which we will actually be looking at today. And so you can explore the variables and run frequency tables in Nesstar without registering. But if you want to do anything more technical in Nesstar, such as create crosstabs or download any subsets of the data, then you need to be registered and logged in within Nesstar to do that. And just note now that Nesstar can be a bit sort of particular about that. So if you do go off after this to explore it in more detail, I suggest you register on the UK Data Service website first, and then from there go to Nesstar and carry out the analysis that you want to do. If you try to log in once you're in Nesstar, it can be a bit less successful sometimes. And just to reiterate that if you are part of a UK university, then you will be able to register quite quickly with your institutional login details. If you're not from a university or a UK institution, you will need to request login details from the UK Data Service, and that may take a few days to come through while we check that you're eligible. And just to say how to find Nesstar. So from the UK Data Service homepage, if you go to Get Data, and there's a drop-down menu, and from there you can say you want to explore data online. Once you select that, the first option for exploring online is Nesstar. So if you click on Nesstar, it will take you to a Nesstar page, which tells you a little bit more information, and then there's a link which will take you straight through to the tool. And this is what Nesstar looks like. As you can see, not only does it hold the census data, it holds all sorts of other survey data that we have as well. But like I said, I will show you this momentarily. In fact, I'll show you it now. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate, first of all, how to find some of the information about census microdata on our website. And then I'm going to show you the catalogue pages where you can find out more information, as well as the documentation that I mentioned earlier, and how you go about downloading those microdata sets. And then we'll look at Nesstar and how you go about exploring it. So I'm just going to switch over to a live website. So hopefully this works and doesn't cause too many issues with bandwidth. So hopefully now you can all see my desktop. And so this is the UK Data Service web page. And so from here, the first way that you can find census data and microdata that we mentioned is if you go to the Sketch Data tab at the top of the screen. And if you look at key data, and this will take you through to all the main data sets that we hold on the UK Data Service website. And you'll see that one of those categories is census data. So this is census data here. So if you click on census data, it comes up with a bit more detail. And if you go to the census support site, and you'll find a dedicated sort of sub-site for census support and census data. And down the left here, we have all the different types of census data that we have, including microdata. And so from this page, You can explore more and read more about census microdata, as well as link through to the catalogue records for all the different census microdata sets that we have, right back to 1961. The other way to search for the data is from the UK Data Service homepage. It's just to type into the catalogue census or census microdata, and then it will come up from our catalogue with all the relevant links. When I search the UK Data Service catalogue, I prefer to, once you get the search results, to look at the different series of data. If you're looking for some of our key data, one of our bigger data sets, or it will be in a series of data. So because we have lots of catalogue records for census data, we put them all into one series, and that's called the UK Census. So you can click onto the UK Census series and you'll find a short abstract and some frequently asked questions, but you'll also find this Access Data tab. So you can access the data here, and it tells you what's available. So we've got 1991, 2001 and 2011. If we drop down from one of those, for example 2011, it tells you all the different data sets that are available from the 2011 data. So here we have aggregate data and flow data, but we also have lots of different microdata sets for the different nations. I'm going to look at, and those are available via local authority or region. And I'm going to look at this local authority data set, census microdata, safeguarded for England and Wales. And so once you click on the data set that you're interested in, it brings you up to the individual catalogue page for that data. So this is the catalogue page for the 2011 local authority census microdata for England and Wales. You can see as you scroll down the page, again, you know what topics are covered, you get an abstract, and it tells you the edition history, when it was published, and it also tells you something about the coverage and methodology. Importantly, the second tab along the top here is the Documents tab, and this will tell you the code book, so it gives you more information about all the variables within the data set, and the user guide, and a bit more study information. And all these documents are freely accessible before you've registered or downloaded any data. You will get a copy normally with the data set when you download the data set, but they're all accessible here on the website as well. And then to actually access the data, you click on the Access Data tab, and this is where you need to be registered or logged in, and then you can add it to your account. So that's how you access the census microdata from the catalogue. The other option here is that you can access it online, and this will take you through to Nesstar. However, I'm just going to show you the quickest way to Nesstar. If you just wanted, you knew exactly what you wanted, you'd maybe done your research, you'd looked into the census 2011 data, you knew you wanted to look into it. So you come to the UK Data Service website and you want to get data and you want to explore it online. So this is probably the quickest way to Nesstar. You can just go straight there, and this is the website address for Nesstar. So we can click on here. So that's how you can find Nesstar. So there's many ways that will link you through to Nesstar, but I think that's probably the most direct and straightforward way. And so once you're in Nesstar, you can drop down here on the left from the research data sets. And as I mentioned earlier, you can see we've got quite a lot of research data sets available. It's not just for the census data, it's for lots of the other social survey data we hold. Just to point out that we have some teaching data sets as well, but they are safeguarded, those teaching data sets, just as the research data sets are. But we do have some unrestricted access data sets here as well. And under unrestricted access teaching data sets, you'll find the teaching data sets for the census for 2011, as well as one there for 1981. But today we're going to focus on the research data sets for the census. So from research data sets, you can drop down to this one here that says census microdata and sample of anonymized records. So we call it now census microdata. It used to be called the sample of it, like SARS, so sample of anonymized records. But so census microdata is the most contemporary name. So if you click on that, it will bring you up the 2011 option. And so we can click down from there and you can see that you can have data for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, or for England and Wales. So today we're going to look at England and Wales. And from here you can either look at data for the local authority or by regional. We're going to look at the local authority sample. And once you drop down from there, there's some metadata available for the data set, and there's also the different variables. But first, before you see that, you can see that in the middle of the screen, an abstract has come up about the data set. So it tells you how it was collected, why it was collected, and the main topics within it. So that's just the short abstract for the data set. But then if we go into variable descriptions, it's got groups of variables. So all the variables have been grouped by different common themes. And today we're going to focus on looking at the variables relating to the individual person. And so from here, you've got the whole list of the different variables that are available. And once you click on any of these variables, so for example, if we clicked on ethnic group, straight away it brings you up with a distribution for that variable within this data set. So this is just the 5% safeguarded 2011 census microdata set. So you can see that we've got 80% of that data set identifying as white, English, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish or British, and then all the other categories which had people identifying as. And you can see down the bottom, there's summary statistics, and included in that is some missing cases. So that would normally, for a question like this, be people that chose not to answer it. But you'll find details of what not applicable means in the documentation that I showed you earlier. And it tells you what -9 refers to for each category. So, but it's important to realise when you've got anything that's missing or -9, it's not counted in these percentages. So these percentages are just of the valid cases, and they don't take into account any of the missing data. And so just as an example, we can look at another variable. So we might look at general health. And again, you can see the distribution for that. So most people, as you would expect, well, actually only half say they're in very good health. But if you add very good health to good health, we've got what's that, 80% of the population saying that they're in good or very good health, which is nice to know back in 2011. And again, we've got 34,000 worth of not applicable, so missing cases for that question. So you can just easily in Nesstar click on different questions and quickly get the descriptors for them. So if you just wanted to find out a quick statistic, it's a nice way of going in and finding out something to maybe give a bit more detail to a report you're writing or a research proposal that you're putting together. It's a good way of gathering context for those questions. And Nesstar, just to point out as well, at the top of the bar we have a tabulation option, and that is where you can create crosstabs, and analysis will let you do some regression analysis, but to carry out those extra features you do need to have registration, so you need to be registered into the Nesstar before you will allow you to carry out those procedures. So what we'll do now, so I think we'll give you 15 minutes for this activity. So the first question that we had was, how many cases are there in the England and Wales 2011 microdata? So how many cases were there? So how many people, what were the numbers that made up this 5% sample of the England and Wales 2011 census? So there's a poll coming up now, it's multi-choice. Tell me what you think the answer is. Which one do you think is right? So how many cases, cases are there in the England and Wales 2011 microdata? So I'm looking for total cases. And like I say, this wasn't about necessarily getting the answer right or wrong. It's just about understanding the data and understanding what it's telling us. you can work out the answer by looking at the information from this variable year last worked. So have a look at that and tell me if you can see what the total cases are. How many cases are there in the England and Wales 2011 microdata? The correct answer was the 2.8 million, so that bottom question. And if you can see on the screen here, what you wanted to do was look at the summary statistics. So after the total cases. So for this variable, year last worked or last year worked, we only had 2.09 million people. Is that right? Yeah, answer that question. And so there's this other 751,000 people that were missing from this case, or missing from this question. They were missing cases. Those 751 people represent, I've got it here, just the exact wording, anyone aged under 16 or students or school children living away during term time or persons who had never worked. So they weren't asked that question in the census, but they were part of the census and they are part of that microdata set. So even though they're missing cases for this variable, they are actually part of the total data set. So if we're looking at the total cases in this microdata set, we're actually got 2.8 million, so 2,848,149. So that was the answer I was looking for there. And it was just sort of to demonstrate that once you get a variable up like that, that's just raw data. So you can't necessarily take it for face value. You need to sort of look at it carefully and understand what it's telling you. And it's relevant for the next question as well. So you might want to rethink your answer quickly. It's to the second question, which was what proportion of the population is usually in work? So there were several variables that you could have looked at to find this out, including that last one that I had up. But what proportion of the population is usually in work? So I've got another poll for you coming up here with multi-choice again. So you can tell me what proportion is usually in work. Is it 47%, 57.5%, or 63.8%? So here are the results. So we've got 24% of people saying 47%. Well done, that's the answer I was looking for. And we've got 59% saying 63.8, which was the percentage that I'd highlighted on the sheet to ask you what that percentage referred to. And as I mentioned on the last slide, that 63.8% actually referred to the number of people in employment out of the number of people that had actually ever worked. So that 63.8% didn't take into account young people, people that weren't of working age, students, or people that had never worked for any other reason. So that is only a percentage of the working population, the population that had worked or currently working or had worked at some point in the past. So what we wanted to do was have a look at that figure. So this is another variable that gives us details about employment. So this one's asking people who are currently working how many hours a week they work. And so we can see here that 1.5 million people were currently, no, that's the missing one down here, sorry. We can see 1.3 million people were valid for that. So there's 1.3 million people currently working. But what we want to look at is the total cases again. And so to work out the total cases, we add together the valid cases and the missing cases, and we get that same number that we had before, that 2.8 million. And so then we know that the number of people working is this 1.3 million. So if we divide 2.8 million by the 1.3 million, we get the 47%. So we know that about half the population is normally working. The other half are young or retired or students or are not working for other reasons. So that's the answer I was looking for then. So it's 47%. So it's about half the population are normally working. And that's just interesting, and, in the context of that activity, I think, in the current situation with people working from home and the work changing so much, it kind of puts it in context of how much of the population is normally working. Which brings us to the last question, which was how many adults in employment are usually working from home? So we've got most of the people saying 10.4%, and that is the answer I was looking for. The 4.9% is the proportion of the total population that is working from home. So again, half the population work, so it's roughly half that percentage is the people who are from the total population that are working. But of the working population, so how many adults in employment are usually working, that's the 10.4%. And that's from the 2011 census. So obviously that data is a bit old now, but still when we take that into account with the current statistics coming out of ONS about how many people are home working, which was at around 46%. So it's a fourfold increase in the number of people working from home, given the conditions with the virus. So that's one way that you can use census data to find information that gives you context to different questions. But that's just very simple looking at the descriptive statistics, and you could do a lot more by going into it and dividing that by different factors using crosstabs or the regression models.